Second Nature, Cassie, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
So, you are the founder and CEO of Wild Rye, and I've been so excited to have this conversation. I've been paying attention to what you've been doing, what the brand has been doing, but now we all kind of collectively get to learn about not just the brand and you, but just all the detail that got you to here. And I think we're gonna have a really cool discussion about all the ups and downs along the way to get to this point, and also where you're headed. You've got a new brand rebranding that just went live, and a bunch of other exciting stuff on the way. So I'm fired up.
Yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs, and I'm not afraid to share all the downs.
That's the best part. Those horror stories go such a long way in helping all of us learn too, like what's the point in going through those downturns if you don't get a good story and a good lesson to share from it,
Mhm.
right? And
A lot of great
so
stories.
we appreciate the honesty and transparency and just the vulnerability, because it's not easy to put that stuff out there like that. So I'm excited to get into all that stuff. But maybe as just a starting point, could you give us sort of the founding story of Wild Rye? How did this happen? Where did it come from?
Let's see. Let me try to do the abbreviated version. I was in-house at Smith for a long time here in Sun Valley when Smith was still headquartered here in the Wood River Valley, where they were for about 50 years before relocating to Portland, Oregon. And during my time at Smith, A, fell in love with the outdoor industry, B, attended just about every trade show out there across categories and found a pretty gross lack of representation of women on the trade shows in, the innovative apparel and products out there. The marketing airwaves really didn't share female athlete stories as much back in the day. And I mean, I'm not speaking about Smith specifically, but the outdoor industry as a whole. One of the more influential moments was walking through Interbike and feeling like there were more scantily clad booth girls than there were women actually working in the bike industry at that stage. And yeah, I mean, it took Smith relocating from the valley to force my arm a little bit to think about what might be next. But that ultimately led to the founding of Wild Rye to bring women better apparel options, a community, a brand that only tells female athlete stories and community stories, and brings women of the outdoors together. So, yeah.
So cool. Yeah, the bike industry specifically had I think the phrase is shrink it and pink it, right? Where you just make it a little bit smaller and color it pink, and that's your offering. And so a lot of the stuff that was being done was just not considered for the end user at all. And I
Yeah.
think by adopting that style of approach, you sort of miss out on the real business opportunity there. There's a huge market of people that are willing to buy product, and no one was making really much of anything for them.
Yeah, and it was a total chicken egg situation. The brands weren't creating product that women wanted to buy or that fit women's bodies, so women weren't spending. And so then the companies were continuing to justify that there's not a market for women's apparel, especially not at a high price point or premium level. So yeah, it kind of took actual users of women's bike product to shake things up a bit. And I'm definitely not alone in that, but it took women of the industry taking a stand and, sort of forcing the issue.
I'm really interested in this first step that you took. So Smith moves to Portland, Oregon, and then you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not moving to Portland, and you know what? I live here. I don't blame you. I'd rather stay in Sun Valley. That sounds
Certainly not
great.
that simple.
I am certainly simplifying this process, but I'm really curious about those first steps. So you have this insight that, hey, there's an opportunity here. This needs to exist. I'm going to be the one to, really put my flag in the sand and make it happen. But it's really difficult to go from having an idea to that first stage of execution. And now we see what Wild Rye has turned into. But what did that first couple months look like for you?
Nothing that simple. The first couple of months looked a lot like me consulting and talking to a lot of people about how I felt like the outdoor industry wasn't doing a great job of representing female founders, representing female athletes. And that conversation with some journalist friends of mine in my final days at Smith led me to connect with a woman that I'd previously known from my Bay Area days who had this idea more fully formulated. Her name's Katie. We founded Wild Rye together ultimately, but it took me pitching her, hey, let's do this together. We both have this idea. And she, she did a lot of the legwork in the early days because I was consulting. I had, outdoor clients up, you know, tons of them to pay my bills after leaving Smith. And yeah, so we worked together to launch Wild Rye. Gosh, yeah. I remember sitting at the Nordstrom's cafe at Outdoor Retailer having this conversation with Katie, proposing that we do this together. And this was August of 2015. And we ultimately launched in August of 2016.
Wow.
So,
1 year to really spin the whole thing up from idea to execution. So
yeah.
you had this discussion, and then what? I mean, how
Then
did you
we posted on Craigslist that we were looking for a designer,
okay.
and we found a designer. Her name is Kelsey. She's still with the brand today. She has
Amazing.
been with Wild Rye now for, I guess, 9.5 years because she
From
was
Craigslist.
from Craigslist.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. Neither of us came from apparel. We were both from the industry, but we were more in marketing project sides of the business. So the operations, design, product standpoint, we were clueless, completely clueless.
But it sounds like if she's been around that long and you've built this company, clearly you found a diamond in the rough, somebody who knew their stuff and was going to be a huge get on
Yeah, we found a
Craigslist.
serious diamond in the rough. And, she was interesting to us because she came from fashion, but was super passionate about snowboarding and spending time in the outdoors, surfing. She was very committed to pushing forward sustainability amongst apparel design and apparel brands. So she had all the right ingredients, and we've grown together. I think we were her first freelance gig after leaving a premium jeans company in LA.
So what did that first launch look like when you had your designer, you had your first run available for release? I'm just walking through sort of the tactical stuff because I find this so fascinating. And this is honestly, I think for a lot of people, the first hurdle, right? You have this
Mhm.
idea, and then how do you move to execution in 12 months? So you use Craigslist, you've got the idea, you've got the concept, you've
Yeah.
got probably the name by that point.
We
Then you
whipped out the branding. We actually, oh gosh, the name. We actually had a totally different name. So that's a whole nother story. And yeah, I mean, we initially launched with the intention of producing domestically. So we launched with some partners. Oh gosh, this is my mom brain kicking in, but I believe in North Carolina, who were going to produce our four-piece mountain bike collection, a pair of baggies, a chamois short, and two merino-based tops. And so, I mean, I'm noted that we launched in August. That's not typically prime shopping season for a bike company. We were 4 months late on delivery from the manufacturer. Um, Not only was it late, but two of the most critical pieces were completely flawed. So the chamois shorts had these elastic leg bands. You know how the silicone goes on the inside to hold them in place. Well, the silicone was on the outside of the elastic leg bands.
oh no.
So we had to find seamstresses to unsew and resew on every single leg band. Um, yeah, so that's one of the product flaws that we had to fix.
Wow. And that you found this in August or you had it ready in August
I think we
to
ultimately had it ready in August. We actually
okay.
launched with product ready to go in August. So I think we found this in July.
That's a very hectic year.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the flip side, or not on the flip side, but in addition, our baggy shorts were the waistband was an inch out of tolerance, which basically means that, when you're manufacturing something, you tell your manufacturer that there's an eighth of an inch of tolerance. So if you're plus or minus an eighth of an inch from your spec um, measurements, it's okay. We can deal with it. But this was a whole inch outside of tolerance. And so our size medium short fit like a large. And we had to, message upon launch that if you're, looking for a size small, you're going to have to buy an extra small. And yeah,
Wow. They threw
very,
everything at you when it
yeah,
comes to every possible curve.
Needless to say, I'm not a fan of US manufacturing, which is a whole nother can of worms these days. So,
Interesting. Well, I mean, what do you do with a factory that doesn't deliver essentially what you ordered? I mean, you've obviously, raised enough, or collected enough money to be able to pay for that first run, but it doesn't come out to the point that you want it to. Do you just have to kind of grit your teeth and get through that run, through the inventory, or?
yeah, a small brand like us had zero leverage. Our factory was like, nah, we don't care. Like, there's nothing we can do to help you. Your problem now. So, yeah, I mean, these initial manufacturers almost sank us before we even came to market. We were completely self-funded. We didn't have external funding. So, this was money out of our own pockets to bring this first production line to life and then pay extra to have things fixed.
Wow. So
Yeah.
so how did it go once you actually got the product right and you got it to the market? Were your, expectations met? Were, you had this idea that this needed to happen? Did you get the right signals coming back to you that like we're on the right track? How did the first
Yeah.
launch go?
Yeah, luckily we got the right signals. I mean, our early customers were certainly forgiving. Things still weren't perfect. There was a lot of room to improve upon, but the excitement was there, the energy was there, the press was there. Um, the shopping was there. The customers showed up and spent their dollars with us, and that allowed us to get our winter product live that season and then switch manufacturers to Asian manufacturers, and bring spring 27 to life. But yeah, every dollar went back into manufacturing the next season.
That's incredible. I have a question about, the summer and winter product lines, but first, how did you, so you basically got this thing, you realized that this US manufacturer wasn't it, and then what is it like to go find an Asian manufacturer for apparel?
I mean, I have to give all credit on that one to Katie, my business partner at the time. She did a lot of the ops behind the scenes work on this, and she was at Specialized Bicycle Components at the time and had a lot of relationships with people who had gone through their apparel departments, and they helped recommend some manufacturers that would do smaller batch manufacturing for us. And we moved to a manufacturer who's not who we're with today. We've continued to evolve and finally found a manufacturer that was all the right ingredients. But it's a lot of due diligence, a lot, and some trial and error.
We were having a conversation with the founders of Scratch the other day, and they were talking about how it's not like something's wrong and then you make it right and keep moving. It's sort of like you get it right and then it breaks again, and then you got to go back, and you're sort of spiraling forward where you're constantly in a state of problem solving or resetting or rebuilding stuff that you thought was right, and that it's never this sort of binary like it's broke, now we fixed it. And
Nope.
it sounds like
Oh,
manufacturing is
wow.
probably one of the biggest for that.
It's broken. Let's try to make it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better every time. But no, it's a complete evolutionary process that you don't fix in the snap of a fingers or the switch of a manufacturer.
During that time, I'm assuming you were probably still consulting, and it sounds like Katie was working still at Specialized. And this was sort of, did it feel like a side project, or were you actively trying like right out of the gate to be like, this has got to be the full time deal?
No, it was very much so a side project at the time. I mean, Katie was actually she left Specialized around launch time. I think that was the agreement that she had with them, and she went back to being an art history professor. So she was, I think it was at Sierra College in Tahoe. She was a art history professor full time, and I was consulting full time, and we were just trying to keep Wild Rye afloat, which I think is ultimately why Katie bowed out of the business about 2.5 years in. She just was exhausted and risk adverse and wanted to go back to skiing from time to time, which is totally fair.
Yeah. At the risk of being indelicate, what is a conversation like that like when you've built something with someone and they don't want to continue on?
It was surprising, it was heartbreaking, but it was also, I mean, we had a really good relationship. We still have a really good relationship. We're each other's biggest cheerleaders. She came to me and she was like, I don't know, like, I'm looking at it from the back end. It's really hard. The numbers don't pencil in my head and I'm tired. I want a simpler life. She certainly got held up on placing purchase orders with the factory because they're really expensive and it was personal money on the line. And yeah, I mean, she basically she gave me a great deal to buy her out for the cost of the inventory on hand less my ownership percentage. And so she made it very possible for Wild Rye to continue on, because if she actually wanted um, you know money for the brand assets and things beyond inventory, there's no way Wild Rye could continue on. And so yeah, the options were to buy her out or to sell the inventory on hand and let it fizzle out. And I was on the flip side, where I was on the front end of the brand in the marketing world and out there at trade shows and in person with people. And while the numbers didn't look gorgeous on our financial statements at the time, the momentum was there, the energy was there, the excitement was there. And I knew that we could capitalize on that and make those financial statements look better if we just persisted a little longer. And so yeah,
Very
it was
cool.
I mean, I think we had about the cleanest and most amicable founder split possible.
Yeah.
And she's gone on to be a novelist and has New York Times best-selling novels out there. So I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, that couldn't have been easy, and I'm sure it was we're obviously simplifying it for the sake of the podcast, but I'm
Yeah.
sure that wasn't a single conversation, and I'm sure that was probably a scary time for both of you to have to go through
Mhm.
that. And at that point you poured not just money but 2.5 years of your life into getting this
Mhm.
brand off the ground and trying to
Yeah.
establish it, and what you interpreted to be signals in one direction maybe she didn't interpret,
Mhm. Yeah.
and trying to balance that out must have been a real challenge, because yeah, you're looking at it through two sort of different lenses as well, from the
Yeah.
business and inventory versus the overall
The fun stuff.
feeling. Yeah, the fun stuff.
She got the
Exactly.
shit. I got the fun stuff in those early days, no question.
Well, I wanted to go back to this question too of, you started out with this mountain bike line of four SKUs, and then you also had a snow
Hmm.
line that you came out with, fast follow with that. So when you launched the brand, that was sort of the whole thing, right? Where we all exist in this space where we're not just like only a mountain biker or only a skier, but we do
Yeah.
outdoor activities year round.
Duality. That's
Did
Wild
that
Rye's favorite word right now is duality.
duality? I love it. I mean, that is the true thing. We're outdoor people, and we do more than one thing, and we exist in more than one plane. But did that feel like too much to bite off in the very beginning, where you're like, cool, we're actually taking on two sports and trying to message? I mean, I guess it's the same
Mhm.
audience, but I feel like, was that difficult?
We felt like the audiences were adjacent enough. We when we Katie and I talked about it, we felt that most of the major US brands were climbing in snow. And so we saw a great opportunity to be more European inspired, where it's cycling in snow. And so we were trying to take that European model and apply it here in the US specifically for women. And yeah, I mean, our intention has always been to be a multi-sport brand. I mean, we saw the biggest opportunity in bike, but Katie and I were both skiers first and foremost. And
Uh,
so, um, yeah, it never really was a question whether we'd be in a single category. Um, that was just not what we were going to do.
were you right, I guess, is the question. How is it looking now? Is it more ski than bike? Is it pretty even? Like,
I mean, bike, no question, took off. It was, the energy behind bike was really, really powerful and took up a lot of our time and resources in the early years. We've always had ski base layers, but as you can imagine, marketing base layers can be a little more challenging because it's inside all your layers. And so we're launching our first snow outerwear collection to consumers in fall 25. So we've dropped it to the industry, tons of great feedback and excitement around it. But yeah, we're really, 8 years later, after 3 years of development, are preparing to launch this collection to, the world in a couple months. And um, yeah, so definitely bike took over those first years. They gobbled up the bulk of our attention and resources.
Yeah.
And so now we're balancing.
I mean, 3 years in, at the time probably felt like this thing has taken forever to come together, but really like in the world of production is a pretty quick turnaround for most of this stuff. And now
Hmm.
you've got both these categories absolutely firing, which is pretty exciting. That'll
Yeah, it's
be
really
a great
exciting.
launch. One of the questions that I sort of teed up before we started talking, I've been thinking a lot about, there are a lot of people that have launched brands or are trying to get things started where they've just been pushing on sheer force of will and doing all the work and execution themselves and not been able to hire people. And I was having a conversation with my friend Alexa, who works over at Shimano, and we were
Hmm.
talking about strategy versus execution. And sometimes it can feel when you're so focused on execution that you're just going around in the same circle, and it requires strategy to sort of zoom out. Like strategy kind of breaks the cycle, as
Yeah.
it were. And I'd be curious to hear from you, because you've grown. It's not just you anymore, and a designer that you've met on Craigslist. Like, you've got a team.
Yeah.
How did you go from those early days, and how did you think about adding people to your team in the early days to start that process where it's not just execution of like, all right, on to the next line. You had to build out support within your business to actually stand it up.
The first 5 years, it was just me and Katie in those early days, Kelsey from Craigslist, and and full-time jobs. So it took us a really long time to get to the point of thinking about hiring anyone else because I was just trying to get to the point of working Wild Rye full time. Um, we were completely bootstrapped those first 5 years. We didn't raise a penny outside of our own investment until 2021, I think, um, which was 5 years into the business. And COVID was what forced me to go full time ultimately. I just had a baby right before COVID hit. A lot of my clients were panicking about whether they'd be able to pay for their contractors. So I was really overwhelmed, trying to keep Wild Rye afloat and trying to keep my brands happy. And, multiple brands that I consulted for came to me with this concern of what was going to happen. And I was like, I'm good. Let's pause our relationship. We can circle back once we figure out what the world's going to look like in a couple months. And so that freed me up to dive into Wild Rye full time and actually pull out a little bit and start thinking about strategy and who we are and who we're for and how we're going to get from point A to point B. That, yeah, when those amazing brand partners came back to me in July or August that same year, I was like, I'm good. I'm Wild Rye full time. I'm going to shut down my consulting business and give this a go for real. And soon after that, I hired a woman who was our first full time employee, and I hired for my weaknesses. I mean, to free me up to focus on the things that gave me energy that I felt like I was good at, and let my first full time employee focus on some of the customer service and operations, the wholesale sales side of things. Those were areas I was really excited to hand off. And then we started building from there. So that's like the early days. I would say we are still trying to get ahead of strategy. I mean, I was just talking with our marketing director last week, and we're about 2 weeks out right now
Cool.
in terms of execution. And so, we've got our big campaigns mapped out for the year on the marketing side, and we've got product roadmaps for the next several years from a product standpoint now. But, um, you know, there's always room for improvement, and we're starting to implement some systems and processes. I'm actually working with a group executive coach. I don't know exactly what to call it, but they've helped implement, sort of the CEO cadence and company calendar so that we're putting together goals and a North Star structure in place and giving that visibility to everyone on the team so that we can all be working towards future goals. Sorry, I just talked about a lot all at once, and
No, that's really great.
break it down a little more.
And
Yeah.
how big is the company in terms of employees at this point?
I believe we have 10 or 12 full time employees, and then a handful of pretty full-time contractors, including Craigslist Kelsey.
Craigslist Kels. That's amazing.
Call her that from now on.
I'm curious what really kicked off the conversation with the fundraising. You brought in some capital. Was it, really led by increased inventory? Was it a bigger kind of strategic move to grow in a major way? Like what were the conversations that you were having that led to that moment of like, I think it's time to take on capital?
I've always struggled with when to take on capital, and I didn't feel like I could take on capital until I could give it 100% of my attention. And so once I went full-time Wild Rye and had time to zoom out a little bit and think long term, that's about when I realized that we were going to need a lot more money to do anything meaningful, to start moving at a faster clip. But also I knew that I could, that my investors could trust me with their money, because I was giving Wild Rye 100% of my attention and not getting pulled in too many different directions. So that was important to me, to be full time before asking, friends, family, network to believe in me.
I'm sure that closing that round of funding probably was a big signal that you were on the right path, because people, surely it was because they trusted you, but also they saw the opportunity that existed
Yeah.
investing in the brand and the growth and everything.
Yeah.
What are some of the other signals that you've kind of taken along your journey that have made you really believe like this is the right path? This is my signal that I got to keep going and this is going to work.
Oh man. I mean, there are a million little micro signals. Back in the early days, I remember walking into REI to pitch REI on the Wild Rye business, and Katie and I had this whole presentation prepared, and they cut us off pretty quickly, and they're like, "We know what Wild Rye is. Like, we're stoked. We want to bring you in. We just want to see the product." So,
Wow.
that was a pretty cool indicator that the world, the big guys are paying attention and liked what we were doing. Um, we have a really exciting brand collaboration coming out in March, that was a huge validation point that this massive brand, a brand that I care about a ton and is super personal to me, sort of looped back to us, and we're like, hey, we want to do a brand collab with you guys. We want to reach more women. We believe you're the right partners to work with on this. And that's a great indicator. But every time we show up to an event, we get the validation. We were just at Winter Sports Market last week, and Sea Otter is always really validating. And, you know, um, yeah, hearing from customers, the customer feedback, reviews, every little micro piece of validation.
Yeah.
I have a board next to my desk that has all these nice letters and things that keep me going.
How did the REI distribution and that relationship impact your overall business?
They were one of our first major retailers. So when they said that they wanted to bring us in, it was very exciting, very validating, like we just talked about. But, every year they've grown sort of their support of Wild Rye, and we've grown our partnership together. So we started online. We moved to 5 doors. We moved to 30 doors. We moved to 99 doors. And now we're in every single REI door, with, a narrower selection of our products. But they've been there for us. They've supported us when we couldn't pay for inventory and helped work with us through some of those challenges. And, operationally, they're quite difficult to work with, but every person we've worked with at REI has been incredibly helpful and supportive of the business. And, the fact that our values are super aligned, I think is part of the reason that relationship has been so strong.
I'd love to hear a little bit, and we've talked about this on previous pods, and you and I talked about it earlier, but I feel like one of the best things to share that really helps everybody out is these like horror stories and like key learnings along the way. And we talked about a few of them so far, but could you share maybe a story or two of just stuff that's happened along the way that has really kind of changed the way that you approach things from a difficult learning? It sounds like the merchandise not showing up in the right sizing was a pretty big inflection point for you, but have there been other things that completely changed the way you think based off of sort of
one of my favorite stories is when I bought out my business partner, and I was left to figure out the operational side of the business. First of all, I didn't know what a freight forwarder was. I was like, who are these people? Can't we just ship it UPS or FedEx? Like, I'm so confused. I don't understand what this guy Tony does for us. And there are all these acronyms like Bill of Lading, BOL at the time, and I had no idea what HTS codes were, like completely oblivious. But a couple months after Katie bowed out, I got an email from our factory and was like, hey, we've developed these products. Are you ever going to place an order for them? And in my head, we'd already developed these products. They knew what numbers we wanted and everything. Are they not making them? I'm so confused. And I had no idea what a purchase order was, that I needed to place a purchase order in order to get said product. So, I mean, this is just me being completely oblivious, but I have, I guess all of that is to say, I've made a hell of a lot of mistakes due to ignorance, and taking that and turning that into a learning to ensure that I never make that mistake again is how we've continued to evolve and improve. And, I believe, wholeheartedly in making mistakes, as long as you learn from them, as long as you don't make the same mistake twice. Trying things and failing is a very important part of our business. And, I'm trying to loosen the reins a little bit and empower other people to try and fail, as long as it doesn't cost a lot of money, like some of my earlier mistakes. So, yeah.
What did you have a process for, figuring that out when it came to understanding the purchase order process, bill of lading? Like, I mean, a lot of people just Google that stuff, but
I did.
Google is your friend. I guess now ChatGPT probably bails a lot of people out too.
Seriously, you lucky guys these days in really ChatGPT. A lot of Googling, a lot of BOL as it relates to international shipping, because there are a million BOLs out there. And in full disclosure, I still don't totally understand what a bill of lading does for anyone other than that you need it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I learned pretty quickly what a purchase order is and how you place those now.
There's so much stuff when it comes to shipping stuff, the harmonized product code and all. I mean, there's so many different things you got to know that just why. It is pretty nice when you've got an operations person that can just handle it all for you. And
I was going to say, I'd say that's probably what I learned the best, is to hire people to do some of the things that are just not my cup of tea.
the value of the ops person, work. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about marketing, because that's sort of, the strong suit. That's a lot of your background. Mm-hmm. What's it been like? Because we've talked a lot about sort of the stuff that you had to put together to get the business off the ground and to get the inventory happening and all the struggles that have happened there. But as someone who, has this really strong marketing background, what was it like marketing the brand on top of all the products and stuff? And what were sort of the inflection points there?
The marketing of the brand has always been really, really exciting, because I'm so passionate about it. And it speaks to who I am as an outdoor adventurous woman. From day one, our sort of stake in the ground is that women don't fit into a single box. And I feel like the outdoor industry tried to put people into boxes, and we wanted to celebrate the whole woman. So, the leisure athlete, in the words of Katie Burrell, the podium athlete, the record setting athlete, but also those people as community advocates, as full-time professional people in whatever field they work in, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, we wanted to celebrate women in the outdoors as whole people. And our rebrand really reflects that and continues to reinforce that. So I'd say something that we've done a really good job at is we haven't wavered on who we are and who we're for and how we speak to our community. We have been who we are since pre-launch in 2016. So
what a cool lane to be able to work with too, and not a lot of other people in that lane. So you've got kind of free reign to tell the stories and to give that kind of depth and really show exactly what Wild Rye is all about.
Yeah.
Are there any big highlights that you've had? Maybe an athlete you worked with, or someone who really kind of helped break things open for you a little bit?
Man, we've worked with a lot of great humans.
More appropriately, do you think about athlete marketing separately than you think about brand marketing? Are they two different buckets in your mind? Because a lot of times when we're talking about, mountain bike or ski specifically, you go to
Hmm.
the top of the mountain. But
Hmm.
as Steve Holmberg, kind of our insights guy, likes to talk about this idea of mid mountain, where it's like everyone can access this idea,
I
right?
was gonna say, I feel like we've worked with more mid-mountain athletes. Not entirely true. We certainly have some top of the mountain athletes like Lucy Sackbauer and some other folks, but our athlete team has always been focused on strong members within their communities, as opposed to, I admire Michelle Parker an incredibly lot, but we could never afford someone like her, so we had to get scrappy and find other ways to develop an athlete team because we are a performance brand, so we need that credibility, but we also once again felt like we wanted to bring in athletes that are really well rounded and have broader stories to tell than just the big lines they're skiing in Alaska. Not saying that that's all that Michelle has to talk about, because she doesn't. She's incredible, as you know, from Red Bull.
Yeah, big
She's an
fan.
incredible human. But yeah, so I mean, honestly, I think one of the things that really broke things open for me was we launched a Planned Parenthood benefit tea right after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed. And just the energy and excitement and um, sort of buzz that created. Not only did it feel like 100% the right thing to do for us as a female founded, female first brand, um, but it validated how much our community was tuned in to who we are, and that we were doing the right things for our community. So more than athletes, I think it's been some of those causes that we've supported, that have really made waves and differentiated us from the sea of outdoor brands out there.
Really fascinating. I think that's something that not a lot of other outdoor brands would really approach in that way. They're so focused on heavy performance and not really getting into, surely they get involved with the protect our winters or something that sort
Hmm.
of every outdoor brand would
Yeah.
want to support, but going really deep into a cause like that and putting yourself out there, I think is a big statement. And it is amazing when you make those big moves, you get the commensurate result too.
It was terrifying. I
Yeah.
remember I was still pressing the send button on our Klaviyo emails at that stage and putting together that email. I was like, I think I know our community well enough to know that this isn't gonna, lose all of our customers. But yeah, I pressed send and the response was incredibly positive. We certainly got a few negative comments back, but by and large, it strengthened our relationship with our community rather than alienating people. So it's something that we have continued to support through. And yeah, I think we're about the only outdoor brand that does support reproductive health care causes.
I mean, it seems to be in line with, the whole person, not just, their time on the hill in the winter or in the
Mhm.
summer specifically. It's really the full 365 days of the year, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
What about I want to talk about the partnership that you've had with Red Bull, because you've been involved with Red Bull Formation, and in fact this year being, or in 2024, a huge
Mhm.
year with Red Bull Rampage. The women rode for the first time ever in the event. They had their full day, and Wild Rye was proudly there on the on the all the signage and stuff too.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about where that whole relationship started and kind of how it developed?
Well, Wild Rye wants to be on the forefront of creating opportunities for women. And we saw formation as this opportunity to continue to grow the sport of mountain biking for women, creating access for women, creating role models for women. And so we were initially connected, I think, through our PR agency to the team at Red Bull Formation and had the opportunity to invest a few dollars and show up on site and support those women and tell some stories surrounding the women digging and riding at Formation back in, was it 2021 was the last year? 2022?
So yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, and that was, I think, just getting on the radar of the athletes that were legitimate and we're here to support them. I mean, full disclosure, we still don't have the budget to support any of the athletes that are riding in those situations. But we had the opportunity to support the group of women that were pushing the sport forward, and that was very exciting. So when Red Bull announced that they were opening a women's field for Rampage, we jumped at the opportunity, and the events team made that opportunity possible for us. And um, yeah, I mean, it was a monumental opportunity. I mean, I keep saying opportunity, but it felt like an opportunity more than anything, to show up there and have a presence and, cheer on the women at the highest level. And yeah, I mean, we ended up on SportsCenter's top 10
That's so cool.
by
That's
default of being there. And I had friends from outside the industry texting me, and they're like, is this the same Wild Rye? I'm so confused. Not confused, but like excited, but holy shit. That's
yeah.
so cool. So,
I mean, to think about starting with mountain bike apparel, and obviously you do ski, but starting with mountain bike apparel, and then fast forward how many years later, you're on SportsCenter supporting the biggest mountain bike event in the world as
mhm.
a partner of the event. That is a giant,
Yeah.
I mean, wow, so
I
incredible.
came home from Rampage and rewatched the whole event on, I think, during the men's delay, on the couch by myself with my dog. And I just remember bursting into tears watching it and having to pinch myself that we were there, and this little brand that I dreamed up and that Katie and I dreamed up, got to be there at, the top of the top in terms of women's competition. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible.
Well, one of the things that I've got to imagine, you've spent part of your career as a consultant, and then you launched this brand, and now, I'm sure that you are someone who that a lot of people really look up to in this space as someone who's sort of done it. And you've got to be a source of mentorship for some of the up and coming people that are trying
Yeah.
to kind of figure it out for themselves. And I'm not sure what that looks like for you, but have you had a chance to mentor anyone that's sort of, a couple years behind you? And if not, or if so, what is that conversation? What kind of advice are you giving to people that are saying, hey, I want to make the next Wild Rye. I want to launch my own
Mhm.
brand. I've got this idea. Where do I start? What should I do?
I've talked to a lot of female founders over the years. I love talking to other female founders, no matter what point in their journey that they're at. And a lot of it came through Women Led Wednesday, which I think you mentioned wanting to talk about, which we can
Mhm.
go back to. But yeah, I mean, I think that women, people in general, but women for sure, get paralyzed by perfection, wanting everything to be perfect before they put things out there in the world. And that's always my first piece of advice, is just don't let the need to be perfect paralyze you or keep you from even starting. As we've all just learned, we messed up a lot, and nothing was perfect, and nothing will ever be perfect. So um, you have to start somewhere, and it's how you learn from those mistakes that is going to keep you moving forward. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of blanket advice that I give to other founders.
That's great advice. Can you talk a little bit more about the Women Led Wednesday? How did that start? What was the mindset behind that? And how's it going?
It was 2018, and Katie and I were talking about when to launch our own holiday sales. And, you know, um, it was it was the year that everyone was talking about, how do we get more women into C suites? How do we get more women onto Fortune 500 boards? And, I paused to think, it's like, well, are we doing anything to support brands that are currently, led by women? Is there an opportunity to do more there? And so the combination of when do we launch our own holiday sales, and feeling that Black Friday felt icky with mass consumption, and Cyber Monday felt like an opportunity to battle with the big brands and the war of ad dollars and and
Yeah.
whatnot. We just didn't feel like we had a home in that holiday shopping period. And so I started poking around, and there was nothing that supported female founded brands, which felt a little weird, given the news cycle of that year. And so, I mean, honestly, it started with a Squarespace website and an email to about 50 friends and whatnot, asking if they knew any female founded brands that would want to join us and sort of create our own holiday. And I think we had 50 brands that first year. And in a 2 weeks time period, I think we launched it in about 2 weeks before the actual day. And now, let's see, 7 or 8 years later, we're up to like 900 brands and a more robust brand directory. Um, so yeah, it's
Wow,
been growing.
that's amazing.
It's a painful passion project that doesn't get enough time and attention, but
900 brands, though. I mean, to start with an email of 50 and to get to 900 in such a
yeah,
short amount of time, that's a meaningful, it's
we
incredible.
yeah, now that brands can submit themselves, it's made it easier to grow.
Yeah, I can only
Back when
imagine.
I was adding every single brand to the website, it was
Like you needed another project to work on at that
yeah,
stage, I'm
exactly.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be someone listed on the 900, although I would imagine they are. What brands are you looking at for inspiration, or what people do you look to for inspiration when it comes to your own journey?
I don't know. I'm a huge how I built this listener. So I love founder stories. And I like, we've talked about the ups and the downs and the personal stories that go alongside of it. So, a couple of my favorite episodes have been with Sarah Blakely of Spanx and Whitney Wolf of Bumble.
It is an amazing show.
Yeah, I
Big
know,
fan.
amazing. I was part of the Tory Burch Foundation Fellowship a couple years ago, and so Tory Burch and her team have been great role models, and just how they support female founders is really inspiring to me. But yeah, I mean, I think those who have found ways to do more than just grow their brand with their platform are some of the more influential people. Those who give back to the greater female founder ecosystem, and that's where I want to see myself as I continue to grow and get there, because I still feel like we're a long ways from there.
What does the Tory Burch Foundation look like when it comes to being part of that?
They have a fellowship where female founders apply, and they end up bringing on 50 fellows each year, and it's a year long of programming through the Tory Burch Foundation. And I believe there was a quarter on understanding financials and financial acumen. There's a quarter on marketing and particularly digital. Um, Gosh, I can't remember what the other things are, but it's basically a mini MBA. And at the end of the program, you have an opportunity to put together a pitch for an ask, whether it's a corporate partnership or funding or, yeah, whatever your ask is. And they help put that ask together and help you connect some of the dots. So,
Very cool.
yeah, it was, I mean, it came for me, it was in 2020 during the pandemic when I was feeling really alone. I mean, we're based in Idaho. There's not a massive network of female founders here. Between that and then Title IX's Movers and Makers program, which is a sort of collection of female founders that Missy Park and the Title IX crew supports. Those were my support groups during a really scary time to be a young brand.
Well, what does the future look like for Wild Rye? I know you just did a rebrand, so you kind of reset the look and feel of everything. But what can we expect over the next 3 years? I guess what's
Yeah. Oh
other
my God.
than I know you're launching outerwear for ski, but
Stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we're launching a really exciting brand collaboration on the bike side. We have more water friendly products coming out in later spring. We're really excited. I can't give away the campaign name because it's really tongue in cheeky and goofy and very Wild Rye. And then yeah, we have outerwear. Outerwear is definitely the biggest thing that we have coming down the pipeline. We have a couple new hires. So we have a new national sales manager. We're really excited about her, and a rock star operations gal, as we were talking about, someone to take over all the things that I'm really bad at. I really can't sum it up into one thing, but expect Wild Rye in more categories and continued growth nationwide, continuing to support the whole human woman, celebrating the duality of women, the bold, the beautiful, the strong, the feminine, all the different elements that make women women. So yeah, we'll continue to fight through the next 4 years for reproductive health care.
the, I'm here. I'm in the
I'm
front row
tired.
cheering this on. I'm so excited to see this brand and all the things that you've kind of brought into the world, and I think this is a really cool thing. It's not just a single sport, like you said. You really kind of cover everything. And I think that's really special because I'd love to see more brands do this kind of thing. And I think there's a huge opportunity here as you've explored and brought to life. So I think that's really incredible.
Thank you. We're excited
So
and a little
we
overwhelmed.
slightly overwhelmed.
Hmm.
I think rather that than the other way though.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So we typically end every episode of Second Nature with a segment called BPC, which stands for brand product content. And it's sort of like something that we like to share that maybe we didn't get to in the conversation today, or maybe it's something that caught our eye or that we're really excited about. And I just gave you the heads up on this right before we started recording. So I'm happy to go first, but usually we let the guests go first. What do you want to do?
Oh my gosh, this is hard.
Well,
Partially because I'm partially concussed right now, so my brain's not firing on all cylinders.
uh,
But that concussion definitely has me wanting a new pair of skis. And I'm just coming back from Winter Sports Market, having tested a pair of the Solomon QST skis in Japan earlier this month. And so I have it's nothing innovative, but man, a good pair of skis really gets you stoked for a powder day.
yeah.
So it's nothing profound, but I'm pretty excited to get out there more.
Is it the same thing as in the bike world where we have this formula for how many bikes you should own, N plus one, and N
Hmm.
is the
Hmm.
amount of bikes that you already own? Is it the same thing with skis?
I would say skis are N+4.
Because you got to have like a powder ski, and then you got to be able to
Gotta have a
skin.
groomer ski, an all mountain ski. If you're a Nordork, like I'm pretending to be, you need a skate ski, a classic ski, a backcountry ski, ski mountaineering ski.
I,
Um,
they're
not
slightly easier to store than bikes, so I
They
guess
are.
four skis probably equal to one bike.
Yeah, exactly. And the cost of four skis to one bike is still, we're under on that one.
Amazing. All
Yeah.
right. Well, my BBC this week is the Elliot Jackson Ode to LA video that he just put together.
Ooh,
And
I love
if
Elliot, so I can't
if
wait
you
to
ha
watch
if you haven't
it.
seen this, it's really incredible. And speaking about sort of the duality of us all, Elliot's this amazing musician. He's got a billion different talents, but
Hmm.
one of them is that he's this incredible musician. And I remember him telling me about it on the phone a couple weeks prior about, oh yeah, like I wrote this song. And then I always wanted to do this project where I could like ride to one of my own songs and
Hmm.
like put those two things together. But what makes this video really, really cool is the execution of this back and forth of being in the music studio with his guitar.
Hmm.
And then it match cuts like perfectly to the bike. So there's like a shot of him turning up the knob on his guitar, and then that flips into him adjusting his suspension knob, or like
That's so cool.
he puts his foot on the pedal for his guitar, and then it flips to him putting his foot on the pedal of his bike, and it just cuts back and forth and back and forth. And then the music that he's riding to is the music that he made. It's just like
Wow.
the duality of Elliot Jackson here as a musician and an incredible bike rider, and the two coming together. It is all time. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes so everybody watches it, but it's awesome.
Please, I can't wait to see it.
Very
That's
cool.
way more interesting than my skis.
No, I mean, I've had a little practice. We're, I think, 77 episodes in.
Yeah,
So,
I want to redo. I'm going to come up with something better and make a cameo in a future episode
hey,
to
we absolutely have
up
to
my
have you back
game.
on the pod. And I think that's what's so exciting about this whole like outdoor industry is that we're all cheering each other on. We're all here to support each other, and we're all like continually checking in. And so where is Wild Rye at this time next year once some of this other stuff is launched and the momentum continues to increase?
Hmm.
We absolutely have to have you back and do a check-in pod in a year or so.
I
So
would love that.
thank you so much for the time today and for joining us and for sharing these stories. I feel like there's so much here that's useful to people that are sort of earlier in their journey and are going to sort of pick up on the lessons that you put down today. So
Yeah. And I haven't even told you about the name debacle yet. So just you wait.
part two coming soon. Well,
Exactly.
Cassie, thank you so much for being on the pod today, and we'll look forward to part two.
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron.